Good afternoon, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that this venue is very convenient for our discussions. It's the center of Russia, not a geographical one, but a spiritual one. This is the cradle of our statehood. Our distinguished historians believe that this is a cradle where the elements of Russian statehood were established. Great rivers, Neva and Valdai, they serve as a communication centers, and it's exactly here where Russia's statehood began to be established. This year, the club united an unprecedented number of guests, over 200 experts, politicians, spiritual society leaders, persons with sometimes different opinions who have their unique ideas. You already have had productive discussions over the last days. So I will be speaking brief. I would like to share some of my considerations on the matters which you touched upon during your discussions. I'm talking not only about the analysis of Russia's experience, historical one. I mean the wide discussion on the values which underpins our development, how global developments are going to influence our national identity, what world we would like to achieve in the 21st century, and what can we bring together with our partners. Today there is a need to search for a new strategy and to preserve our identity in a radically changing world, which has become more transparent, more interconnected. In some form or another, all countries are interrelated. Russians, Europeans, Chinese, all societies are intertwined. And here at the Valdai Club, we are trying to better understand how to answer to this challenge, how our partners are answering to it, and we are listening to their opinions on the interconnection between Russia and the countries which you represent. The question who we are for us, for Russian citizens, who we would like to be, such questions are sounding ever louder in our society. We are going farther from the Russian Soviet ideology. The proponents of the conservatism, which was applicable up to 1917, are far from the realities as far as the proponents of the liberalism. We need to have connection to go further. Otherwise, we would not be able to withstand challenges and to achieve success in the world of competition. And we're witnessing a new wind of such competition today. The new areas of economic, technological, information aspects are in the competition. Military problems are becoming more acute. The world is becoming more stringent, and sometimes even the basic values are denied. We need to cooperate on economic and political areas, but the most important prerequisite is the quality of persons, the intellectual, the ethical ones, the well-being, the geopolitical cloud are dependent on the population of the country, on how the citizens of this country are united, how they believe in their culture, history and traditions, whether they are united by common goals and responsibility. And in this regard, the issue of strengthening the national identity are of fundamental importance for Russia. Russia is not only under pressure of globalization, but also under the pressure of the consequences of global disasters. As a result, we see the catastrophic blow to the cultural code of the nation. We are facing the disconnection between the traditions and the unity of history, deficit of mutual trust and responsibility. This is the reason for many problems we are witnessing today. The accountability for oneself to the law is not only the basis in the law, but in the ordinary life as well. After 1891, there was an idea that the new ideology is going to be established on its own. Political class and intellectual classes withdrew from this issue. And before, the ideology had a bad flavor. Everybody didn't like to deal with it. Moreover, the ideas based on the national identity were similar to the elite, which liked to steal money. Practice has demonstrated that new ideas are not developed under market rules. If the society is shying away, it is not successful, as well as copying someone else's experience. Such attempts to civilize Russia from outside were not accepted by the majority of our population, because aspiration to independence, moral, intellectual independence and sovereignty is an integral part of our nature. By the way, this approach proves not to be successful in other countries as well. We left behind the times when some governance models could have been established as some computer program. We understand that national identity cannot be imposed from outside. They cannot be based on the monopoly. This structure will not be stable and is very vulnerable. We know this from our own experience. It doesn't have any future. We need creative activities, the unity of ideas and experience. We need to analyze our political cultural traditions from different perspectives, while understanding that they are not some orthodox things, that they are flexible and live organism. Only in this case our identity will be based on a solid foundation, and it will be looking in the future, not in the past. And the questions of ideology and development should be discussed by people of various opinion who should discuss what should be done in order to resolve problems. All of us, Neo-Slavics, all society needs to work on establishing the common values of development. We need to get rid of bad habits, of hatred, renouncing any other opinions. We shouldn't pass the future of the country from one person to another, criticizing everything from the perspective of pessimism. This means that the liberals need to talk with the representatives of the left, and vice versa. The nationalists should recall that Russia was formed as a multi-ethnical and multi-confessional country, and if they contest our identity, if they try to exploit Tatar, Russian, Kazakhs, and any other nationalism and separatism, they follow the way of destroying their genetic code, or in other words, they are destroying themselves. The sovereignty, independence, unity of Russia are undoubtable. They are the red lines which should not be crossed. Given differences of our opinions and the different discussions, the future will not be successful without participation of all players. It often happens that then in the history we face the opposition of the Russia itself. Pushkin referenced to it, and we know the outcome. The state is destroyed. We do not have such a family which was not hurt by the disasters of the last century. and the analysis of various historic developments divide our society. We need to leave this behind, to restore the fabric of the society. We should not be disillusioned any longer. We shouldn't disconnect the generations and going to extremes. It's time to stop noticing only bad things in the history. Critics is necessary, but without self-esteem, without love to the state, these critics will be not productive. We need to take pride in our history, and we have something to be proud of. Without admitting this, there will be no way forward, no development of the society. Yet another challenge to national identity is related to the global developments. Here they are related to moral and geopolitical aspects. We witness many Euro-Atlantic countries are refusing, forgetting their roots, including the values of Christianity, which form the basis of the civilization. They are renouncing any ethical basis, any identity, national, religious, or even gender ones. They are following the policy which equals families with many children and one-gender families. Excesses of political correctness lead us when the parties pursue propaganda of pedophilia. Representatives in many Western countries are afraid of mentioning their gender. They even are canceling some festivities, and they are hiding the basis of such festivities, and they are trying to impose this model to anyone. I am convinced this leads us to degradation and primitivization, to deep moral crisis.
What can more testify to the moral crisis of the human socium as not the deletion of the ability to reproduce itself? But now the most of developed countries can't reproduce themselves, including through migration. Without values inclined in Christianity and other world religions, without the moral norms which formed through centuries, we can just lose human dignity. And we believe that these values should be protected. That's correct and that's dignified. We need to respect the minorities, but we need to respect the majority as well and do not put under doubt its right. We see the attempts to revive the unipolar system of the world, to disperse the institutions of international law. And to this unified unipolar world, the independent states are bad. It needs servants. But we cannot refuse to have our historic and identity and face. Russia agrees with those who believe that key decisions should be taken collectively and not by the interest of the single states or groups of states. We believe that international law should be active, not the law of force. We believe that every country and every nation is not exceptional, but it's unique and has equal rights, including the right to independent choice of its development. That is our concept, and we have taken it from our own historic destiny and from the role of Russia in the world policy. Our current opposition has deep historic roots. Our current position has deep historic roots, and Russia was developed through diversity, harmony, and balance, and it brought such balance into the outer world. I'd like to remind you that the Vienna Congress in 1815 and Yalta agreements of 1945, taken with the active support of Russia, ensured long-term peace in the world. Now the role of Russia, that role of the winner in the turning points, was in justice and nobility. And let's think about the Versailles peace treaty, which was concluded without Russia. Many specialists believe that that treaty laid the roots for the future World War II because it was unfair towards the German people of that time, and it gave such strict limitations that Germany would not be able to cope with in its normal regime for the centuries to come. Another principal view. In the European countries and a number of other countries, the so-called multiculturalism, which has been brought artificially from outside, is now being placed under doubt. And that is understandable, because in the basis of that, there is the payback for the colonial past. It is not by chance that politicians and social activists of Europe are speaking about the failure of multiculturalism, that it can't integrate many cultures. But in Russia, which used to be called the prison for the peoples earlier, in Russia, not a single ethnicity, even the smallest one, disappeared for the centuries of its existence. They all maintained their independence and cultural identity and their historic space. You know, I've learned with interest, I didn't even know that in the Soviet time, all tiny peoples had their own newspapers, their languages were supported, their national literature was supported. And by the way, a lot of things which were done then, I believe, should be returned in that connection. We have also accumulated rich experience of inter-influence, inter-enrichment of different cultures. That is polycultural character and poly-identity character. It is in our historical code. We've built our statehood on that for centuries. According to Russian philosopher Konstantin Leontiev, Russia has been always developing as the blossoming complexity, the civilization which was forged by the Russian culture, Russian Orthodox Church, and other traditional religions of Russia. We take the peculiarities of our state from the model of the state of civilizations, because we have always tried to be flexible about national and religious peculiarities of these or those territories to ensure diversity in unity. Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Judaism are integral parts of the identity and historical heritage of Russia in the current life of its citizens. The main task of the state enshrined in a constitution is to ensure equal rights for representatives of traditional religions and atheists, the right to the freedom of consciousness for all the citizens of Russia. But the identification through only ethnos or religion in a polyethnic state is not possible. We should form civil identity on the basis of common values, patriotic conscience, solidarity, and civil responsibility, as well as respect of the law. And this would be impossible without the connection with the ethnic and religious roots. This is the necessary condition to maintain the unity of the country. Thus, we will politically and conceptually form the ideology of the national development and put it forward for further discussions, including with your participants, distinguished colleagues. But we believe that all our philosophy should be based on the development of a person, of an individual that is moral, spiritual, intellectual, and others. Famous Russian writer Solzhenitsyn in the beginning of the 90s called this as the main goal of development. We have to admit we haven't yet managed to fully break the negative tendencies, but we have just took one step back from the dangerous red line of losing national potential. The value of single human life in the history of our country for many times was not very large and very important, because the goal was put forward as the main priority. But now we can't throw into the fire millions of people. We have to use everyone. We have to care about everyone. People, not the nuclear weapons or resources, would be the main power of Russia for the centuries to come. And for upbringing of the personality and the patriot. We need to restore the role of the great Russian history, literature, and culture. They should become the main source for the national identity understanding. And here, a lot depends on the pedagogical staff and pedagogical community, which is the main preserver of the common national values, ideas, and beliefs. This community speaks in the same language, the language of science, knowledge, and upbringing and education on the large territory from Kaliningrad to Vladivostok. And thus this community, pedagogical community, teacher community, on the whole, generally speaking, forges the country together. And the support of this community is one of the most important steps on the way to the prosperous and strong Russia. I'd like to highlight, without concentrating on healthcare and the education of the people, without restoring the confidence in the society, we would lose the historic competition. The citizens of Russia should feel themselves responsible hosts of their country, their territory, their small motherland, their property, and their life. A person, a citizen who can manage his own affairs himself and who can cooperate with those equal to him is important. And the best school for the citizenship and citizenhood is the local authority and NGOs. I believe that one of the best of the Russian traditions, the so-called Zemskaya tradition, is the self-ruling system of Russia, and it has been built on that principle. Only through this we could bring up the real national elite, because every person has to have his own opinions on the ideology, values, and not imposed values and ideology, especially not imposed by mass media or someone from abroad. We need to understand who we trust, and that is a normal world practice. That is why we've adopted new legislation which makes the NGO activities more transparent. Speaking about any reforms, we must remember that our country is not Moscow or St. Petersburg only. By developing Russian federalism, we need to base on our own historic experience and use flexible and diverse models. In the Russian federalism, we have enshrined great potential, and we need to learn how to use it well, without forgetting the most important thing, the development of the regions and their independence should work for creating equal opportunities for all the citizens of Russia without account of the place of their living. It should be aimed at destroying the disbalances in the development of the regions of the country and thus strengthening the unity of the country. Of course, that's a difficult task because those regions for decades or centuries were developing not equally. I'd like to mention one more topic. The 21st century is the century of great changes, of the era, the aeon of forming great geopolitical territories, organizational, financial, economic, and military. That is why our priority is the close integration with our neighbors. The first Eurasian Economic Union, which we've been speaking a lot about for the last time, that's not just the number of agreements which are mutually good for us. That is preserving the identity of the Eurasian territory in the new century, in the new world. The Eurasian integration is the chance for all the post-Soviet space to become an independent center for global development and not a periphery for Europe or for Asia. I'd like to highlight that the Eurasian integration would be built on the diversity system. That is a union where everyone will preserve his own face, identity, and political entity character, political independence. With our partners, we will together step by step implement this project, and we expect it to become our common plan in preserving the diversity and sustainability in the world development. Distinguished colleagues, after 1991, the period after 1991 is called the post-Soviet era. We have managed to go through that era, through the challenges and difficulties, but as it has been for many times, Russia, having gone through those challenges, is returning to itself, to its own history, by strengthening our national identity, our national and historic roots, but remaining open to the best practices of the West and the East. We will and we can move forward. Thank you for your attention.